Hey guys, we have our last section of what's a pretty short and straightforward chapter here. So we were taking kind of a tour of the periodic table. We looked at the groups that are metals and the groups that are nonmetals. So now we have some groups that are mixed, that have some metals, some nonmetals, and some, remember this third category, metalloids. Okay, so remember metalloids are kind of that in-between group. Okay, they don't quite have all the properties of metals, they don't have all the properties of nonmetals, and so they're kind of that mix. So they are some of the elements in group, remember we can say 3A through 6A or 13 through 16, depending on what periodic table you are looking at. Alright, so the first group we're going to talk about, make sure I say the right one here. It's got to be the boron group. Okay, so we look in the periodic table, we find boron. Okay, so this is all talking about all the elements in the same group as boron. So it is group number 3A or 13. That's a 13, not a capital B. So remember, we think about our rules that we learned in the last chapter. We said number of valence electrons is the same as the last digit of the group. So it would have 3 valence electrons. And it would not like 3. Remember, 3 is not one of the stable numbers. The only real stable number is 8 or a full shell. Okay, so in order to get a full shell, it's got to lose those 3, and then the layer underneath would be full. Okay, so if you lose 3 negatives, the boron group is going to generally form a positive 3 charge when it goes to try to form a compound. All right. Next group is very important to us as living things, and that is the carbon group, which would be group 4A, or depending on your periodic table, 14. Okay, and in the carbon group, again, we're talking about all of these elements in the same group as carbon, silicon, germanium, tin, lead, and fluoronium. Sure, never used that one. But we're going to focus a little bit about carbon. It is one of the most versatile elements that exists, and the reason for that is because it is not only small in size, so it's kind of agile, it can fit in to a lot of compounds, but it can also form 4 bonds, so it's just able to do a lot of different kinds of things. So it's one of the most versatile elements as part of the molecules of life, okay, besides water. Okay, so all the things that you associate with living things, so carbohydrates, okay, proteins, DNA, fats, okay, they are all made mostly of carbon. Okay, it's going to be, all of these are going to be made out of carbon backbones, like the carbon's kind of the main element, and then they're also going to have hydrogens and some oxygens and a few other elements, but they are mostly put together with carbon. Okay, so the carbon group, very, very important for life. All right. We have this idea, and again, we're still talking about the carbon group. We're still actually talking about carbon. Okay, and we have this concept called allotropes. Okay, and these are different substances that are made out of the exact same element. So it's pure carbon either way in this example, but they're bonded differently. They're put together differently. Okay, for carbon, again, we're kind of still talking about carbon. There are 3 allotropes. We have diamond. We have graphite. We have one that's a cool one called buckyball, and we've invented a 4th allotrope called nanotubes. Okay, so these are all made out of pure carbon. It's all just how they're put together differently. Okay, Okay, so let's learn a little bit about some of these. So the first one is diamond. Okay, so again, all of these, I really only wanted to detail on 3 of them, but these are allotropes of carbon. Okay, they are just pure carbon. It's just how they're put together. So diamond is made of a complex 3-dimensional bonding of carbon atoms forming an extremely hard substance. Okay, if you've heard of diamond saws, okay, they put diamond on the saw blade because it's one of the hardest things. It can cut through more than almost anything. Okay, second one, again, one you probably heard of, graphite. This is what the black part of your pencil is, what you probably call the lead. It is not lead, it is graphite. It's the part that actually writes. So they're just made of sheets of carbon, flat sheets of carbon that can be pulled apart very, very easily. So when you're dragging your pencil across the page, what you're doing is you're leaving individual sheets. So you're leaving bits of the graphite behind. Okay. Another cool use for graphite, it makes a very good lubricant. They can use it, like powder it, and they people that work on mechanics and things can kind of put that powder between moving parts, and they move past each other or slide much more easily. And the third one that we're going to talk about much at all here is called buckyball. Okay, and it's very, very, very similar to how a soccer ball looks. Okay, so it's formatted kind of like a soccer ball. So we didn't discover this one until we really had microscopes that could really work on a high power. And we took this buckyball and we can kind of pop it and rearrange it a little bit and make the 4th allotrope, which is nanotubes. Okay, and we are able to use those. They're using them. They're very, very strong conductors. And so they're working on using nanotubes to help make amazing electronics. So here's a picture of those 4 allotropes. And let's see if we can label which one's which here. So diamond is described as a complex 3-dimensional structure. So which one looks like it is built where each bond is kind of sticking out in every possible direction? Okay, so that's going to be this one. So this is diamond. Okay, each one of these circles is a diamond, or sorry, a carbon atom. All right. Second one, graphite, made of carbon sheets that are easily separated. So which one looks like kind of sheets stacked on top of each other? That will be this one. So that's the one that's in your pencil. Third one, buckyball, says looks like kind of like a soccer ball. So that's got to be this one. And the last one then is this one, so this would be a nanotube. Now everywhere there's kind of a bend, again there would be a carbon atom. So every single one of these is pure carbon. Every single atom in them is carbon. They are allotropes of each other, which is just that they are structured slightly different. Okay? Alright, allotropes, ones we're going to talk about are the carbon ones. Alright, a couple other elements still in the carbon group. Okay, are silicon and germanium. And they are both very important when we're talking about solar panels and electronics because of their semiconductive property. So remember when we say semiconductor, it's things that can be made to conduct electricity, or under certain conditions they can conduct electricity. Alright, next one is going to be our nitrogen group. And we're just kind of going down the line here. So this would be 5A or 15, depending on your periodic table. So elements in this group have 5 valence electrons. Okay, so 5 valence electrons. So they want to either get rid of all their valence electrons or get up to 8. Right? Because those noble gases, that really stable electron number has 8. Okay, so they either have to get rid of 5 or gain 3. Okay, so it's easier to gain 3. That's less electrons, right? So these ones are going to need 3 more electrons to be like a noble gas. So if you gain 3 electrons that are negative, okay, so when they react and form a bond, they're going to have a negative 3 charge. All right. And so when they kind of maybe want to underline that. In ionic bonds, okay, they form a negative 3 charge. But they could also share electrons. Okay, so they could go the other route and form molecules, which remember is from covalent bonds. Okay, they don't become ions, they're sharing electrons, so nobody's ending up with any kind of a charge there. So, important factoids from this group, we have 2 elements, nitrogen and phosphorus, that are really, really important for the production of proteins and DNA. Okay, so if you don't have enough nitrogen and phosphorus in your diet, you're going to have a hard time building proteins and copying DNA. Okay, so where do we get this stuff? Okay, so we have to get it from the food that we eat. But why? Okay, so maybe you learned in earth science in junior high or something that about 80% of the air you breathe is nitrogen. Okay, if 80% of the air that I'm breathing right now is nitrogen, why can't I just use that nitrogen? Why do I need nitrogen in my diet? Okay, because that nitrogen that we breathe in, we can't use it. Okay, that nitrogen is diatomic nitrogen. Remember, diatomic means it's a molecule made of 2 atoms. And it has this strong triple bond. Okay, we don't have any enzymes or molecules or reactions in our body that can break that. Okay, so we need something else to break that nitrogen for us so that we can use it to build our proteins and nucleic acids, DNA. So nitrogen from there has to put it to compounds we can use by our helpers, bacteria. Okay, these bacteria live on the ground. They also live especially concentrated on the roots of plants like soybeans and peanuts and alfalfa, things in a plant family called the legumes. Okay, but then here's the idea though. So the nitrogen from the air is broken apart by the bacteria. So the bacteria can break that bond. Okay, and they put it into molecules, things like ammonia and nitrates that we can actually use. Okay, so then plants can take those nutrients in because the bacteria was in the ground. The plants take up those nutrients, and then we get those nutrients from either eating plants or eating something else that ate the plants. All right, last group here that we're going to talk about is the oxygen group. So we find oxygen on the periodic table. It looks like group 6A or 16, depending on your periodic table, of course. And elements in the oxygen group would have 6 valence electrons. So in order to become like a noble gas, to become real stable and have 8, they're going to need 2 more electrons to be like a noble gas. If you gain 2 negatively charged things, your charge is going to be -2. Okay, so an oxygen forms molecules. Okay, so again, when they form ions, when they form an ionic bond, they're -2. But when they form molecules, remember they're not forming ions, they share electrons and don't have charge. Okay, sharing does not create ions. Sharing makes molecules. Molecules don't have charged particles per se. Okay, so we have 2 allotropes. Remember we had that word there. but this time we have allotropes of oxygen. Okay, so we have two forms of oxygen, and they're just built a little differently, but they're still just pure oxygen. Okay, so we have the one we're most familiar with, which you usually just call oxygen gas. Okay, it is the most common allotrope of oxygen. It's the diatomic, it's kind of the standard, and it is needed for our cells to release energy for the food we eat. Okay, so you've known for a long time you have to breathe, but why do you have to breathe? Your answer might be, oh, because I need oxygen. But why do you need oxygen? Okay, and this is why. Because your cells, each individual cell needs access to oxygen. That's the only way it can get energy from all the food that you eat. Okay, so you need to eat and you need to breathe if you're going to get any energy at all to be able to stay alive. All right. Second allotrope of oxygen is called ozone. That is the name of the molecule, not the name of the place. Okay, an allotrope of oxygen is ozone, which is found high in the atmosphere and helps absorb harmful ultraviolet sun. And that is the end of the chapter. This is, again, one of the most straightforward chapters. There's not a lot of critical thinking. As long as you can figure out what charge an atom would have based on what group it's in, if it's going to gain electrons, lose electrons, or share electrons. We have those three types of bonds. That's about it. So, as always, let me know if you have any questions. We'll see you later.